Welcome back, everyone, to Vox Markets. My name is Paul Hill, and I'm delighted again to be able to speak to Sara Barrington, CEO of Verici Dx, an advanced medical diagnostics firm focused on the global kidney transplant market. So welcome, Sara.
Good to be here, Paul.
It's terrific to be able to have you back on the show, particularly after the excellent news last week that the company's flagship blood test, Tutivia, had just received US Medicare coverage. But we've always got to run through what that means for the business and for investors. I don't suppose you could just quickly remind the audience exactly what the company does, its sort of key USPs and the sort of market opportunity ahead.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so we're in kidney transplants testing market, and we have three products. One was pre-transplant, one was post-transplant, one was long-term outcomes. Pre-transplant tests got licensed to Thermo Fisher. We're directly selling the early acute rejection, so the early post-transplant test, that's called Tutivia. And then still coming out of clinical trials is the long-term outcomes called Protega. That's mainly focused on long-term outcomes and fibrosis. So for us, that's, the continuum along the patient journey is something significant. And we have leveraged the underlying technology, which is RNA signatures, that leverages both a step change in the understanding of the underlying biology in combination with AI techniques to pull out these signatures from the highly complex transcriptome to be able to kind of answer very specific questions. And also, from those three tests, the idea was to sort of look at the connection between all three to have like this platform play.
Yeah, and presumably the RNA sort of technology, it gives you sort of like a predictive element to a patient's ability to receive a new sort of kidney and sort of what's happening quicker than the existing technology that, as I understand, it is after the event, and it only measures debris in the actual blood. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. We risk stratify. So a prognosis is, essentially Tutivia says, how likely is the patient to be having a rejection? Other players in the field, the cell-free DNA, this debris in the blood that we always talk about is sort of saying, oh, injury is happening, I'm picking something up. It's very non-specific. It just says something. That often is rejection. It often is something else like a passing virus, infection, cancer even. And that has very different therapeutic answers. Whereas ours is much more specific. It's about rejection only, and it's very much ahead of the game. So for the clinician, they've got ample time to deal with the issue if something's brewing. I call it an early warning system. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, and let's move to Tutivia then. Can you just talk through the sort of the significance of the US Medicare coverage? Because I think a lot of people or transplant patients who do have those operations, I think they are covered under Medicare, and what the sort of significance is, and to the actual business to grow going forward.
Yeah, we estimated anywhere, and it varies because people come and go off private plans, but you can estimate anywhere between sort of 60 and 70% of all patients are on Medicare for transplant care. So a major payer. And it's like the government system, and it's managed by a central organization called CMS, and then they've devolved down into organizations that manage that in the local area. Ours was MolDX, so you may hear those terms used. But essentially, it's whether you're going to get paid or not. And then everyone follows the example of Medicare. So once you've got Medicare coverage, obviously the private payers do look to that to take a lead. Obviously, they do their own assessments. Nothing is ever as clear as taking the lead from the government, but essentially it's a very important milestone for us. So to even apply, you have to be out there commercially available. And so, it's the bizarre nature of healthcare that you actually have to be out there selling, commercially available, but not able to bill and collect on that revenue. You actually have to hold claims. So I find it a little bizarre. I'm sure Apple would really endorse that kind of business model for the iPhone. But that's where we are. So that is healthcare for you. So obviously for us, we've been out there, but we've not been able to recognize any of the revenue from the test that we have, if you like, notionally sold, because we weren't sure about the collection, and we had to wait. We had to hold all of those bills until we got coverage, and then we can, obviously release those and negotiate payment for those, and you're off to the races. For me, this is the final piece of the puzzle, right? In terms of commercial viability.
Yeah, and how is the ramp up of those tests over the last sort of like 6 months, and also the acceptance by the transplant clinics and the doctors in terms of the feedback on the actual efficacy of the test?
Yeah, last year was our kind of year of ramp up. I did say to everybody it would be back end loaded, and for good cause, because obviously, we also knew that we wouldn't be able to bill until kind of late in the year or even into this year. So we did see adoption. So we're in about 19 centers right now. And the last quarter was probably the most significant of 2024, as predicted. But then this quarter, obviously, and we announced, the numbers there, just showed the 68% growth quarter on quarter. That's kind of growth I like to see. I think, we were pleased on a couple of fronts. One, we had said that, without Medicare coverage, you do start hitting kind of roadblocks in centers. You're not mainstream yet. Centers do want their tests to be Medicare covered. It smooths out the issues with their billing departments. And it also gives you that level of credibility that you have been reviewed very thoroughly, and it makes you go mainstream. So to see that kind of growth, even without that, was very encouraging. So now we have that. Now we can actually release those claims, start billing for those. We're now, playing with the big boys. We're now mainstream. We can really sort of let loose in those centers that couldn't deal with us for that reason, and now it's time to play the growth game.
Brilliant. And then just in terms of the recurring or repeat revenues from those tests in those particular centers, at what point does it become a sort of like a de facto standard which is built into that clinical pathway for a kidney transplant? Obviously, and you're probably not there yet, but at what point does it become sort of like, just normal business as usual, that a kidney patient comes up and therefore we want the best test in town and therefore it's Tutivia?
Yeah, so the way I look at it is that, you go into a center, they don't know you, the good news about healthcare is it's slow to adopt because, they want to build up a trust, and as patients, we are always glad that they don't try the latest fad, right? So, I think we should all be grateful for that, as patients anyway. So, you'll go in, they'll try you out, you're with one clinician, they'll talk to their other clinicians within that practice, and you kind of, what I call the onesie twosie level. So they're trying you out, you're at the low level, you're gaining trust. At some point, you just get over that trust hurdle, you're into recurring revenue. And then after that, what you're looking to be is written into protocols. So I'm glad to say that we are in a protocol in a center for a certain aspect of post-transplant care, which is phenomenal for where we are. And I think is highly indicative of, the future place for Tutivia in post-transplant care. We are also in high kind of recurring numbers in other centers, 3 or 4, and we can see the rest of the centers coming up nicely out through that sort of trajectory.
Yeah. And in those instances, are you actually replacing somebody else's diagnostic, or is it this white space? This is new sort of like technology that solves an unmet need?
Yeah, a bit of both, actually. Mostly as you go into a center, we are addressing unmet needs. There are certain areas of post-transplant care that can't be addressed by the tests and the technology that's been out there and offered to date, whereas we can. And we have, noted that that's kind of low-hanging fruit. You can go, in the trust equation, you can go in and say, you've got nothing in this area. We are something it's easy to try out, right? But we are seeing centers also kind of compare results to the existing mainstream products and decide to use us in place of, and we're gearing up for us to kind of go into mainstream operations. So that takes time. And the holy grail for us is probably doing studies looking at how that kind of predicted, that prognosis is particularly sensitive to changing levels of drug monitoring, and you can see clinicians being very interested to use it in that way. And when we have that kind of real world evidence, I think that's really the kind of linchpin for going for major growth.
Brilliant. Okay, well, let's move to the other test. We've got Clarava all in the relationship with Thermo Fisher. I think they call it Petra, their test, their sort of branded test. How is that relationship progressing, and what's the sort of the timelines in terms of bringing that product fully into commercial launch?
We're thrilled with that relationship and the investment that they're putting into that product. They call it their kind of flagship new product, so I'm thrilled with that. They're very committed to it. They've been out there putting investment into studies in terms of looking at strengthening the positioning in the marketplace. At the moment, it's designed to be run at the point of surgery. They're looking to see how far ahead of surgery it could be run, to give the clinicians advanced knowledge on the patient. Obviously that manifests in a couple of ways. One is upfront therapy use. Another one is, literally probably sort of assisting with the matching equation. Yes. So, the fact that they want to put that kind of level of investment into studies is incredibly encouraging, and I can see maybe an expanded intended use for the future. So that's great. I'm also seeing them put, a lot of interest in positioning in terms of, if you like, sales and marketing investment as well. I was thrilled that we did a joint symposium at one of the major conferences this year. We decided that, the clinicians were interested in this sort of step up in technology. So from cell-free DNA to these RNA signatures, from, being on the back foot to being on the front foot. And they were very interested in sort of, and we did a kind of round table format with clinicians talking about how they would see that in clinical practice, case studies, a real chat about this kind of step up in technology and the benefits to adopting that in the clinic. It was very well received. They were thrilled, we were thrilled, and I think it's very nice it's a little unusual to do something joint between two companies, but we're not averse to doing anything a little unusual, a little quirky. So, I think we pulled it off, and they were thrilled. So are we. And I think that this is a good move to be able to say, look, at some point, this is kind of based on the same technology, and we do need to do some joint activities when you're doing an education on the base technology out to clinicians, and education on that.
Well, it'd be fabulous if you could get that matching between the patient and the organ pre actual operation, to get that, so effectively have the best way of making sure that that whole operation, that procedure goes well, and the organ is accepted. So that'll be really exciting. In
Yeah, I think
terms,
that's much longer term, but you
yeah,
know, you can see that there are
there's a
multiple
pathway.
ways that you could use that information pre-surgery, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, just let's turn to the final test, Protega. How's that one sort of like? What sort of timelines are we looking here?
Yeah, we pulled that out in terms of the development. We slowed that down. You know, we
Mm,
obviously took a temperature of the industry and the markets.
mm,
One of the things we've been asked to was do a little bit more kind of cost control. So we did a little riff and effectively elongated the time on development. Not by long, but more towards the end of the year for two key programs, the urine and the Protega. Very much looking to bring that to market in the following year. I think the markets, you know, everyone's talking about tariffs, but it really has sort of impacted the whole industry into a kind of wait and see pattern.
yeah,
And so we felt that realistically, we should slow down a little bit there, not spend as much time sort of rushing to get it to a conclusion. I do feel like with Protega, the first foray there should be a research product rather than rushing to a clinical product. I think we've seen the most interest from sort of pharma partners as they look
mm,
to utilize this really in drug development. And obviously that's the holy grail in terms of clinical practice. You know, as you can encourage therapeutic options to treat long-term outcomes. So I think we would start off with the research products there and then work our way into the clinical offering.
good. Okay, well, just to sort of like, if you could just talk through some of the next steps, and I know you can't say much in terms of a potential sort of equity raise, which was indicated in the RNS, but whatever you can say, that I'm sure investors would be interested in just hearing the sort of the timelines over the next sort of 12 months, how you'd see the business move forward, plus anything on the you know, the timescales for the equity raise.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, keeping lips firmly sealed
Yeah.
for regulatory purposes. But, you know, realistically, you know, I think we need to take a step back. I think everybody realizes that we're now at that inflection point. You know, up to this point, there was some sort of commercial uncertainty until you get coverage. We've now put the last piece in the jigsaw puzzle. And now we're in a completely different space. And I think the market is now for us to really grasp.
Mm,
It's a growth story. I'm really excited because I think we've demonstrated just even before CMS coverage, the kind of pent up potential for our test. And I think it's time to kind of knuckle down, put some investment into that expansion and go and really tackle the market and grow. And I think the potential's very large, and I think it's within our grasp. Exciting times.
brilliant. Okay, well, thanks again, Sarah, and very much look forward in hearing how the business progresses over the next 3 to 6 months. So thanks again and best of luck.
Thanks, Paul.